Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network. The broadcast shows are for informational and entertainment purposes only. They are not designed to provide listeners with specific personal, medical, or counseling advice. Individuals with a medical issue should always consult their healthcare provider. MS&Me is not responsible for content of individual shows. The views expressed by show hosts or the guests are their own. Enjoy the show.
Hi there. Welcome to the 49th episode of A Couple Takes on MS. Hi, this is Dan Digman.
And hi, this is me, Jennifer Digman.
Well, Jennifer is my lovely wife. And
thank you, my handsome husband.
And just a disclaimer at the beginning. A couple takes on MS. Jennifer and I both have multiple sclerosis, and we are a couple. We just celebrated our 13th anniversary. And what we do on this show is we take things, life situations, and look at it through different lenses and perspectives with multiple sclerosis. Me being a man with MS, relapsing remitting.
And me being a woman with MS who's been in a wheelchair for a long time. Gosh.
16 years, babe.
That's just insane, 16 years. Do you ever feel like that? Like, I can't believe, A, that I've known you 16 years, but B, that 16 years has passed by. Time goes quickly.
It truly does.
And I think that's why it's so important that we're talking about what we're talking about today.
And what we're talking about today, last time we talked about flying, making connecting flights, and challenging yourself, doing things that scare you. Well, this last weekend, we did that one thing, another thing that scares us, that we want to talk to you about and give you tips for camping with multiple sclerosis and a disability.
And I think that that's really important, is to challenge yourself. And as silly as that sounds, you could say challenge yourself with a healthy diet, challenge yourself with new exercises. But for me, my challenge was to go camping. For heaven's sakes, I'm in a wheelchair. I need help pretty much most of my day. How was I going to face the great outdoors? That seems daunting. At least it did to me. And I think this was the perfect place to do it. We went to a camp not terribly far away from our home. And we were with some really good friends for this camping experience. And it was Friday, Saturday, and we left Sunday. So, we had a whole weekend. And thank you, Michigan weather. It was beautiful and sunny. And I think that really made a memorable experience.
And I think first and foremost, and we talk about this, when we're talking about camping, it truly is great outdoors. Campground and everything. This is something, obviously, you've told me on multiple occasions. You didn't grow up camping. You didn't like camping. This was something that really became something we really wanted to do last year. What happens is every year our church goes to, it's called Coldwater Lake Campground. It's out about 15 minutes west of town here. And they do like a weekend camp out with people who from the church who want to go camping and everything.
Yes.
And we went out just as far as the service.
Yes,
we went out to the church service and bonfire and grill out and hang out with friends. And the nice thing about this particular campground, obviously there are places where people can hook up their campers. There's campsites for tents. But this campground here, just west of Mount Pleasant, Michigan, has little cabins.
Little cabins that you can rent that are accessible, that I could roll into, and it's a dry place to stay. And I kept calling it my little box. because it was our little home away from home for the weekend.
And I think that's the big thing was when we were there last year and looked at the cabins, they have ramps that roll up into it. I mean, there's only like an inch or so up. It's not like a big, huge ramp, but it is just a box. I mean, they talk about rustic.
It was rustic.
Rustic, however, it did have electricity, so we at least had working lights, and the most important thing is you could charge your cell phone at night.
And when we looked at it last summer, they had bunk beds, which they had this when we went last weekend. But we were able to call and say, if you could separate the bunk beds, Dan would be able to transfer me into my single bed. Because there wouldn't be, if you can visualize, like an upper bunk that one of us would bump our heads on. So they separated the beds and made it completely accessible for him to transfer me in to bed at night. And with that knowledge that they could do that, we were all set to enjoy camping.
And that's the big thing is when you're doing that, obviously look to make sure that it's an accessible campground. But when you're making these reservations or making these plans, don't be afraid to ask for special accommodations. And I think in terms of separating the bunk beds, because all of the cabins had the bunk beds, they said that they would be able to do it, but they'd want to do it like later in the season because they wouldn't want to have to separate them. And so, fortunately, we were able to do it later in the season. And what's nice about that for those of us with multiple sclerosis is later in the season means it's not hot summer temperatures.
It's not hot summer temperatures. The campground was still quite full. There were a lot of people there. So it wasn't that we wanted to go when there weren't people there. We appreciated that we were able to separate the bunk beds and it wasn't as warm. So that being said, it doesn't mean that it wasn't warm because Michigan, like I said, was beautiful and sunny. But we were able to, as we were doing activities outside, we were able to find shade, and that kept us cool so that we didn't overheat.
And I think that's the big thing with the multiple sclerosis and everything, because it was when we were in the shade during the day, it was fairly comfortable. But when we walked out onto the trails down to the main pavilions, we were in the sunshine, and it was hot. So I think that's the big thing. If you're doing outdoorsy things in the summer, obviously, and if you're camping, spend a lot of time in the shade because it is a lot cooler, and especially because you're out in the country or in the woods.
And spend a lot of time well hydrated because water will keep you cool. But the neatest thing, or one of the really cool things about the Coldwater Lake Family Park, is that they had, and I wish I knew the proper name for the term or for what they had, but it has a beach. It's a lake, of course. But they had a section of the lake, the lake, where they had, what would you say, like plastic or?
It was a plastic accessible thing on the beach, on the sand.
So I could drive my wheelchair. As a matter of fact, all of us from the church, we took a photo together on the beach, and I was able, I don't know if you've ever had the unfortunate experience of trying to wheel a wheelchair onto sand, but it's not easy, or to use your power chair on sand. Do you remember the year that we tried to do that?
We got stuck in the sand.
Yeah, and I got stuck in the sand, and it was just nightmare. But they had a area that was hard, smooth, like plastic, so I was able to wheel onto the beach. And I thought that was probably one of the neatest things, is I got close to lake water or to beach water, and I smelled fish, and I could just feel that the air coming off the water. And it was something I haven't done in a number of years, and I thought that was fun.
And what's nice about that with Coldwater Lake is they have something, and this is where the accessible nature is really cool, where you could, as a wheelchair user, could transfer into one of their wheelchairs that rolls into the water, and you could get in.
I would be able to do that, to roll into the water. You know, we had talked about a few weeks ago, Dan and I, or earlier this summer, we had the experience where we were able to accessible fish. So it's untrue to say I haven't been on a lake in a while, but
That was a dock. This
was
is
a
a
dock.
beach.
This was the beach, and I didn't sink in the sand, and I thought that was awesome. And while our friend Amy, who really helped make all of this happen, was really instrumental with our church planning for the weekend, she wanted me to try to get on the, for lack of a better word, like beach chair or get into the lake. I feel like that's a little more risky. You know, this was a pretty big summer for us. We accessible fished, we made a connecting flight, and now I went camping, and I'm just like, yeah, water and the whole drowning thing, I'm still a little afraid of that. So maybe next year I'll be brave enough to try. Not that you'll drown, I'm not saying that, but I'll try getting into the water.
Well, I think that's the big thing with the camping with those sorts of things is it's a challenge, and anytime you challenge yourself or do things you're afraid of, take the risk, but take calculated risks. I think there was
That's
no
true.
there was no there was the worst that was going to happen is we would have to turn around and drive 15 minutes home if the camping didn't work. I think our biggest fear was, imagine then with the transfers, with getting Jennifer in and out of the, these are like campground issued cots that sank really far down, and it was
Our bunk beds were quite low to the ground.
they were low to the ground, and then for me to be able to help and the reality is, and I've commented on it before, but Jennifer is actually 2 inches taller than me, and so I need some height and everything. The nice thing about this, we realized that we couldn't transfer her out of the bed in the middle of the bed because that's where it's the most springy, but then as I was like testing things out, if I could get her closer to the ends of the bed, that wasn't quite as springy. And actually, even though they were low, the springs actually helped, because as I was helping her to stand, I'd push her down just a little bit so I could get the retraction or the bounce to help her spring up. The other thing, when you're going to do the camping, it's best ideal to not go it alone. I mean, the one thing, we were there with a group of friends from church, and I know that when we got ready to go to bed or leave the campfire for the evening, one of our good friends, Tony, Amy's husband, I was just like, now have your cell phone, because they were in a cabin probably about 20 yards away, and I'm just like, if anything goes bad, I'll text you if I need help in the middle of the night when anything with Jennifer and the transferring. So always have a backup plan. Always have a safety net there to help you, because these are big deals when you're dealing with stuff like this.
And as I think about the getting on the water, getting in the lake and their accessible chair, I imagine I could ask my caregiver, Marcus, maybe someday next summer he would say, yeah, I'll go with you. And that way I can help transfer you, because Dan has multiple sclerosis. And if it's a sunny day or if he goes swimming and he gets tired, it would be really good to have another person to help transfer me. And that's kind of the backup, like you said. So plan if you're thinking about camping. If this is something that you would like to do that you haven't been able to experience, see if you can find an accessible park or campground near you. I know I heard my husband say a few times that he really enjoyed camping when he was younger. And I wanted to share that with him. I wasn't raised as a camper, but I really wanted to be able to share that experience with you. So when we did see that Goldwater was accessible and that it was doable, I was that much more excited to go camping.
Well, that's the other thing, is when we're talking about accessible, I mean, our cabin in the whole place where we were was very close to an accessible bathroom, handicap accessible. Obviously, and I'm sure people could do it. I think if you have MS, you could totally rough it in a campground with pit toilets. But when you're talking about
A
needing to use a
wheelchair.
wheelchair and everything, but this, and they had showers if we wanted to shower. I mean, fortunately, we were only there for a couple nights. It could just
And I
wash up
was
quickly.
roughing it.
We were. I think that, but it's just to find the places to make sure that the bathrooms, and I think something I found with the camping community, I never once was I afraid because they obviously didn't have family restrooms, but when I would go in with you into the women's restroom and
That's a good
help you,
point.
I never felt like any, obviously you check and make sure, and ideally we go in when there's nobody in there, but if somebody should happen to come in the middle of it, people in the campgrounds, camping community, everyone's there to have fun, enjoy things, and people understand.
And I think we can stretch that out to just the community as a whole. We've written about this before that when Dan, or the male caregiver for a female, we've noticed that with our multiple sclerosis community, has to help in the ladies' restroom. Women generally, we understand and we appreciate that the husband or the caregiver wants to help. So much like camping this weekend, or if we used a public restroom or a rest stop
As we're traveling.
So I think that that's generally just, it's the human experience. Everybody needs to use the bathroom, and disability should not keep a husband from helping his wife or vice versa. So I think that that's a really important point. And another thing that Dan and I were thinking about is if the bathroom was not as close to your cabin, let's say you decide to go camping, take a bedside commode. Maybe you could have a chair where you could go to the bathroom in your cabin, in your bedside commode chair. It's not ideal, but if it's going to allow you the opportunity to camp, maybe that is the adjustment or the accommodation that you make.
That's one thing that we had considered, and I think if we ever, when we go again,
Yes,
we would
absolutely.
take the bedside commode just to have that in the whole just in case. I mean, because
Yes.
one thing to transfer, but then to get up in the middle of the night to go to the restroom. So I think take things, and one thing, always take water, and as we're talking about the restrooms, but at the same time you're camping, you need to stay hydrated. So my lesson learned was, for as much as I was thinking I need to make sure we take enough beer,
You have to have the water.
have to have the water, and and truly that's one thing that we did do when we got there. Fortunately, there was a party store just across the highway from the campground, and that what I bought 2 really big bottles of water because I'm like, we can't go without the water.
No, you need the hydration, and I'm sure those of us with multiple sclerosis, we know how we get a little loopy when we aren't hydrated or when we're overheated. So those are 2 things to really keep at the forefront of your camping experience. Just stay hydrated and stay cool. If you need a cooling vest or a neck scarf to cool you off, but vice versa, the next time we may camp may be a lot cooler. So pack, layer clothing, have a sweatshirt, take your blankets. Heaven knows we had a lot in our little box cabin. We had blankets and comforters and Sherpa blanket, which is super warm, because I find that a lot of people, for as awful as it is for them to deal with heat, it's equally awful for me to be really cold. That makes my spasticity, boy, that fires on all cylinders when I'm really cold and I'm very stiff, and it makes it difficult for you, Dan, to help transfer me. And that would certainly dampen your enjoyment of a camping trip. So take clothing and blankets and...
Well, for as much as warm as it is during the day, I mean, at night it gets chilly and it gets cold. So I mean, how both mornings, or at least the one morning, I know actually both mornings for you, just wearing a sweatshirt in the morning because it does get cold.
Right.
And I think too, one thing as you're going camping, always make sure you're taking your medicines. I can't imagine what it'd be like if you would have forgotten your baclofen or
Yeah,
something.
take your medicines. And here's a friendly tip. If it's accessible and has electricity, make sure you have your wheelchair battery, because that's something I didn't have. And when you're driving around on bumpy terrain, you're out in the woods, your chair battery would really like an occasional charge. So pack your chair battery.
Like the charger.
The charger, that's it.
I was
I'm
gonna
sorry.
say, well,
The charger, yeah. So that, and then simple little things like I forgot a hairbrush. Well, that's okay the first night. Maybe the second, you're going to just kind of look a little funky. But boy, by the time I went home, I was like, oh, I need to brush my hair. And so don't, try and have the foresight to think about the things you're going to need. Thank heavens, like you said, we had our medicine and we had our clothing, our warm clothing and our blankets. But, a battery charger and a hairbrush. We had our toothbrush. That was good.
And we did brush. That was.
Yeah, so I mean, you just, you are away and it's a weekend just to enjoy and spend time. We were with our church family and we did some service projects. And I know for a good 2-3 hours, I never once was thinking about multiple sclerosis. Even though my right hand has been incredibly obnoxious and not working, I haven't been able to do a lot with it. Dan and I were able to do this service project for our church, making placemats for the homeless shelter that we're going to have later on this year. And so Dan and I got to be creative and work together on this. And then we also wrote cards for shut-in members of our church that aren't able to make it to service. And just, the fellowship that we got to share with members from church really helped give me a couple hours not to think about the disease.
It is. I think that's where we are fully aware pretty much every second of every day that we have multiple sclerosis or that it's there. But what a beautiful thing, and I think for everybody listening, just to where you can go to a place and even though the MS is there, it's not the focus of your attention.
No, and if you're a caregiver for somebody with MS or any other health condition, that's why it's so important. Just, 72 hours, that's about how long we were gone. Just to get away from it all, get away from work and your commitments or your television. We just really could spend some good time with friends and just felt good to check out for a couple days, and that was really nice.
And that's where we checked out, but at the same time, I think during the dinner on Saturday, Tony and I were watching the Michigan game, but
Yeah.
but it's just like
we had to, of course, Facebook Live just once about what an incredible experience this was, that we were really enjoying it.
Well, and I think that's what we really want to do. This is why we're talking about this today. Obviously, we shared like our whole experience and everything, but it's just to give you all tips and insight to say that, even though you have multiple sclerosis, even if the person you care for, using a wheelchair, having progressive MS, relapsing MS, anything is possible,
If you're patient and you're willing to put in some homework, much like the accessible fishing we talked about earlier this summer, or the connecting flights, do your homework, find out what is possible. In fact, my caregiver Marcus, after this incredible camping experience, he told me about how his mother had gone camping with him and they rented an accessible cabin that had a bathroom right in it. It's a campground maybe an hour, hour and a half north of us. So if you are interested in camping, do your homework. Be patient. Look for things. Look for word of mouth. Look on Facebook or look at MS communities. See what's possible so that you can enjoy living with more than just multiple sclerosis, but you can enjoy fun things despite the health condition.
I think what's interesting then, we had this incredible experience, and it's like the annual church camp experience and everything. Right. But what are you doing in like 3 weeks, Jennifer?
Well, that would be I'm going camping with my husband and my good friends Amy and Tony and their beautiful daughters. And we're going to camp again. And this time we are going to remember to take my battery charger and a hairbrush and warm blankets and clothing. And
did you ever think, Jennifer, that you would go camping twice in 1 year, twice within a month of each other? I mean, what pushed you? What made you realize and think that yes, you want to do this again?
Well, I mean, it was an amazing experience, and nature is beautiful. And this was an opportunity to see the great outdoors and beautiful stars in the sky. And, maybe in a few weeks, if it's rainy and cold when we're there, I won't be as singing the praises of camping. But, it was great time spent with my husband and some really good friends. And that's what I'm looking forward to. And that's why you always encourage me to go camping, or always talked fondly of camping.
I'm glad you gave it a try. I'm glad it worked out so well. But that pretty well ties it up for us today. But what about you out there listening? Tell us about your camping experiences or other tips that you have for overcoming the challenges of camping in the great outdoors. You can reach us on Twitter at DanJenDig.
Exactly.
On our website, danandjenniferdigman.com. And until next time, we want to thank you all for listening, and thanks to the MS&Me Radio Network for having us share our stories with you and help you through your lives with MS. And thanks to Blue Draft Kid for composing the theme music to our show. Take care.